the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome to another Shabbat. It seems like it just goes like that.
Sure does.
Can you imagine what the eternal Shabbat's going to be like?
It'll never end.
What's that?
It'll never end.
It'll never end. We'll never leave the shul. So, Shabbat Shalom to our subscribers. It's good to be with you again. And as always, you are as important to us as the very few we are able to assemble here, both Jews, believing Jews, and even if you don't, that's okay with me. Believing Jews in Yeshua, okay, he's a real historical figure, and we just disagree on who he was or who he wasn't. And so that's no reason to not assemble and share our faith in the foundations of really what everything is about, and that is the Torah. It all starts with the Torah, even Yeshua, believe it or not. And so the question is, can you see it, that he is in the Torah? That's up to Yehovah, because unless he draws you, unless he enlightens you, you can't come. You won't. He has to draw you and reveal himself to you, just like he has done to Abraham, like he did to Yaakov, like he did to Noah, like he did to King David, like he did to Rabbi Shaul. Okay? A deeply well-educated Pharisee in the first century. One of the most educated, well-knowledgeable men in the Jewish world. Something happened. A great light appeared to him. And I'm sure all of us, not all of us, but most of us have had that great light appear to us in a way that has enlightened us and opened our eyes to see the mysteries of the Torah and the mysteries of who Yeshua is, the visible image of the invisible God. Our Parashah for today is Shemini, which means eighth. The number 8 is in chapter 9, verses 1 through chapter 11:47. And the number 8 is significant in Gematria, and I would say Kabbalah, however you want to put the emphasis or the accent. It's a new beginning. And I pray that Yehovah give me the grace and the strength to convey what he's given me to speak on for this Parashah. I pray that you are enlightened. I pray that the light of the truth, of the knowledge of who Yehovah is, permeates your spirit, your mind, and your emotions, and causes you to enter in to a relationship with the Creator that you never knew you could have. So, I'm going to read chapter 9. I'm going to just read a little bit, because I want to set this up. What I feel, the beginning of Vayikra talks about the offerings. And I think that, I know, the offerings are so central to who Yehovah is and who Yeshua mirrored and modeled his existence by. He is the sacrifices. Now, hopefully, you'll see this as we go along. Because he is the mediator between God and man. And the sacrifices showed themselves as a mediator through which man could approach the creator of the universe. If you were unclean, you couldn't approach. If you were sinful, you had violated God's mitzvot, his ways, you couldn't approach him. God laid out very specific ways to express to us how we engage in relationship with him. And even how he may wish. He even explains to us how we need to fashion our hearts to be able to enter into the presence of Yehovah. For him to literally appear to us. That gets pretty interesting and pretty scary. Did you know that in the Torah, Yehovah appeared to the nation of Israel, the mixed multitude? Not just the Hebrews. Remember, it was the mixed multitude in Egypt that had a vision, had a realization, had an awakening to recognize that all these gods in Egypt are nothing compared to the God of the Hebrews. I find that as they enter the wilderness, God begins to reveal himself. He makes it clear. Build me the Mishkan for one reason. Because I want to dwell with you. And once the Mishkan's created and he expresses his desire to want to dwell in this Parashah, he's saying, and I want to appear to you. I've given you the pathway. I've given you the roadmap on how to enter into my presence and to see me. But do you know it? Would you think in such a boring book as Leviticus that that's where the roadmap is? It's all there. The first system of sacrificing blood, bulls and goats, and shedding blood was the first system that was initiated in Genesis chapter 2. Clothing Hava and Adam with leaves and branches and whatnot was inadequate. That's why God had to clothe them with the skins of animals. Well, in order to clothe them with skins of animals, somebody had to sacrifice that animal. Now, my first quiz to you to think about, try to answer it. If God is invisible, we can't see God, and it was just Adam and Eve who sacrificed the animals. Who physically sacrificed the animals? in order to atone for Adam, and Hava? And that's the question you have to answer. You have to seek out. Yehovah said, if you seek me, when you seek me, if you seek me with your whole heart, then you'll find me. And I will reveal to you the mysteries of who I am. So mystery number one, who sacrificed the animals to clothe Adam and Hava? Do you know? You should. It's right there. If you read the Torah and the Tanakh, and if you have the brevity to read the Gospels and Epistles, you may find out who did it. But that's the question. Do you have the chutzpah to seek it out? So here we are in Vayikra chapter 9. It says, on the 8th day. Has anyone remember what Shemini in Hebrew relates to? Does that ring a bell? What about Sukkot? What happens after Sukkot? Or at the end of Sukkot? Shmini Atzeret. Okay. It's a new beginning. What else is on the 8th day? It's when a male is circumcised on the 8th day. Why? It's the entering into something new for that child, the covenant between Yehovah and him, the sign of that covenant. On the 8th day, Moshe called Aharon, his sons, and the leaders of Israel, and said to Aharon, now bear in mind here, this is important. Moshe called Aharon, Aharon's sons, and the leaders of Israel, the Zakins, the elders, and said to Aharon, take a male calf for what? A sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, with a certain requirement, without defect. Now, you need to understand the sin offering and the burnt offering and what the correlation is to without defect. And then not only did the high priest Aharon do this, but he was given instructions to take a male goat for a sin offering and a calf and a lamb, both a year old, without defect, for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for a peace offering. To sacrifice before Yehovah. Also, a grain offering mixed with olive oil, because today Yehovah is going to appear to you. Wow. I mean, these are some instructions to get ready for when Yehovah will appear to you. Interesting. They brought what Moshe had ordered before the tent of meeting. Okay. And the whole community approached and stood before Yehovah. So not only were the Levites and the elders, the Zakin of Israel, but what does it say? The whole community approached and stood before Yehovah. Interesting. Now, if you're a loner, if you find that you prefer being alone worshiping the Lord and watching a service on TV rather than engaging the community, forsake not the gathering together of yourselves. Well, it says the whole community approached and stood before Adonai, Yehovah. Sounds to me like when God appears to us, it's not just to one person. That's one of the ways, at a point and a time, and He will, when He deems it's in His plan to bring someone along. But in large, He speaks to the Levites and the Aaronic line, the leadership, and the whole community. One's not better than the other, they're just given different responsibilities in issuing out the directions of God and the carrying out of them. And so, let me continue. One thing that is really important here is that there's a key element that I think leads us to a roadmap. And one of those points is that both of these offerings and the ensuing ones have a requirement to be without defect. Well, who was without defect? What does that mirror? A perfect lamb. A spotless, without defect lamb. That was a shadow of the messianic Mashiach that would come as the suffering servant that was perfect, walked out the Torah perfectly, honored perfectly Yehovah's ways. He was without blemish. He was the Word of Yehovah made flesh. So there's one little hint. Interestingly, it was one of the elements required that characterized the sacrifice that you had to bring forth. It was a sacrifice. It was going to take the place of you. Its blood was going to be shed in place of you. Because we're the ones that deserve to die because we rebelled against Yehovah's ways. And some simple logical progression when we talk about life for life, it says in Vayikra, we'll get to it in some of these parshas, that the life is in the blood. Well, how did the life get in the blood? What was it saying in Bereshit? God breathed into him the breath of life. If there's no oxygen in your blood, you have no life. Why do you think in hospitals today they measure your oxygen content in your blood? It affects your capacity and your alertness to what's going on. Isn't that interesting? And so the life at this time, in the first manner in which God had constructed so that we could approach Him. And there's so much symbolism in each of these offerings and what characterized them and what they really meant. They were all relational. Isn't that fascinating? God, through who you have to find out who that was, sacrificed animals and covered Adam and Hava. Because the life was in the blood. They broke the life of Yehovah from being around them and in them. Do you think when Adam and Hava, before they fell, do you think that the presence of God did not dwell in them? If God said now that we are the temple of the Spirit of God, do you think He was also then, before Adam and Hava sinned? Well, I don't see why not. And so, when God's life in Adam and Hava ceased, and they had to be chased from the garden, where the holiness and set apartness and purity and cleanliness of who God is, they needed, they basically killed the life of God in them. Isn't that interesting? They cut off, by their conduct and behavior, the presence of God dwelling in them. And there needed to be a sacrifice of blood. Life for life. The life of God was extinguished from them because of their sin, and the life of an animal had to be taken and sacrificed, given up, laid down, in order to allow them to come back into relationship and communion with Yehovah. Now, the next mystery is, who was it that walked the earth and had relationship with them? Who sacrificed the animals? And who was it that re-established relationship with them? Now, look at that a couple different ways. And so, we see that this is what, in verse 6, Adonai has ordered you to do, so that the glory of Yehovah will appear to you. Moshe told Aharon, approach the altar, and now he's giving them instructions. Notice the order. Approach the altar, offer your sin offering and burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself. So, the rule here is that the leadership has got to be holy first, because they're leading the whole community. They're leading the elders. It says, present the offering of the people and make atonement for them. So it was not just a sin offering and a burnt offering for Aharon, and I'm sure that also covered the Levites and the the Zakins, the leadership, but then a separate offering of the people, the community. Now, what does this, in a sense, kind of sound like to you? What feast does this sound like to you? Yom Kippur. When the high priest conducted Yom Kippur, he had to first offer up sacrifices and cleanse himself. And then he had to do a sacrifice for the nation. And so we see here that in verse 12 that, let me back up a little bit. It says, verse 8, so Aharon approached the altar and slaughtered the calf of the sin offering, which was for himself. The sons of Aharon presented the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar. And he poured out the blood at the base of the altar, and it goes into the further parts of and everything and so forth. Where I want to go with this is, I think it's really important to see what is being conveyed here in each of these offerings, and how, think about the arduousness of having to go through all these processes. Okay? Now, I'm sure most of us, and to believers and Christians and believing Jews, some, not all, say the law or the Torah or all these details have been done away with. I think that's a complete misrepresentation of God's purposes right here in this Parashah. This Parashah is about God appearing before the nation of Israel. He's holy. And in order to be in His presence, what we're seeing here is a process of walking out, being cleansed and made holy in preparation to be in the presence of Yehovah. There's more to that. The Shekinah glory, as in the bush. Could the Shekinah glory appear over someone? I'll leave that up to you to imagine who I might be referring to. But we see where he has to, Aharon has got to put blood on the horns of the altar. Okay? Now, why does he need to put blood on the horns of the altar? I think that's a good question. Okay? The sin offering, katad, conveys atonement, purification, and the restoration of a right relationship with Yehovah following unintentional sins or impurities. It symbolized the transfer of guilt from the sinner to the substitute sacrifice, the animal, highlighting God's seriousness regarding sin and the necessity of cleansing. You see, what's really the focus of what's going on here is God wants to be close to us. He wants to reveal himself to us. He wants us to be in his presence. That's the way it was in Eden. And he wants to restore that. And he's made a way for every one of us throughout the whole world to partake of and embrace the sacrificial system as we see here. But you see, the mystery of the sacrificial system is, yes, it's been done away with because God instituted a new way of giving life for life. And that was through his son Yeshua, who was the visible image of the invisible God, the Word of God made flesh, okay? It was his shed blood because he was the perfect, without defect sacrifice that was offered up. And so his life was given for our life. That paid the price. Life for life. Yeshua, why do you think he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Well, because God removed himself from him. The same thing Yeshua went through then happened to us in the garden. We were chased from the garden, from the presence and the God dwelling in us. Yeshua went through the same thing. But he didn't deserve it. He didn't do anything wrong. He was the unblemished, without defect sacrifice in our place. And when it comes down to it, that's what we have to believe in if we're going to reconnect and have relationship with Yehovah, the invisible God. That's what has to happen. To as many as received him or believed in him. God said, Abraham, your faith, your belief has been accounted to you as righteousness. Abraham had a role in creating and bringing forth righteousness through who he was by his choosing to believe. We do the same. And so what we see here in these sacrifices is a shadow of the elements of our relationship with Yehovah. And so what characterizes that? You see, I want to point out that, again, we got to go back to the Hebraic Middle Eastern mindset and the Greek mindset, which the whole world has been transformed into an abstract mindset about seeing and understanding things. That's why it's so hard to become enlightened, by looking at the physical, concrete things. As I said before, see, blossoms. Blossoms of what? A fruit tree. And these are to blossom into producing fruit. That should be the mindset. Our mind's eye should be able to say, I'm here to produce fruit out of who I am, my life, what I share amongst and in relationship with people and with the Creator. So, what do we have here? You see, as I said before, this sin offering highlights the fact that God is very serious regarding sin and the necessity of being cleansed and redeemed. Cleansed and purified and sanctified. And there's a lot of elements in the physical actions that are done in offering the sin offering. And that is, the purpose is, it's an expiatory reconciliation. It's a sacrifice to remedy unintentional sins, sins of ignorance or uncleanness. The offender would physically lay hands on the animal to symbolize a transfer of guilt, followed by the animal's death and the sprinkling of blood to cleanse the altar or the sanctuary. Now, as individuals, what is the sin offering today? Well, we take hold of Yeshua and his sacrifice on the torture stake. And when we have done wrong or fallen short of hitting the target that God set for us in the Torah, his mitzvot, what happens? We take hold of Yeshua and what he did. We're not physically there, but in our minds, in an abstract sense, we recognize what he did and the value of it, and we take hold of that, and if we confess our sins, our missing the target, our unintentional sins, our uncleanness, he is faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. You see, the sin offering represents that atonement is necessary to remove the pollution in our lives caused by sin, which separates us from God's presence. Do you understand why Moshe was instructing the high priest to first cleanse himself and offer up a sin offering? He had to take hold of the head of that sacrifice and confess. Then it had to be slaughtered. And then it had to be put on the altar. And he had to take with his, I think, I could be wrong, I think his pinky, maybe his index finger, I don't know, and put blood on the four corners of the horns of the altar. It's really interesting, and I'm trying to find where I have it here. Let me see. But the point here is that the blood was put on the four horns of the altar to illustrate that God's mercy and forgiveness has been shed and extended to the four corners of the earth, to the north, the south, the east, and the west, to all lands and peoples. You didn't know that there was work being done that God was laying out before the modern world as we are today with such vast populations. He was telegraphing a point that the message of the gospel, the good news that Yeshua has sacrificed his life, shed his blood for the world, to the north, the south, the east, and the west, to all peoples. But salvation comes through the Jews. Yeshua was a Jew. Which, as we understand this, we bring forth the knowledge of these things and we shine forth as a light to the nations, to the north, the south, the east, the west. And so, you see, the horns of the altar also represent the authority of God. I don't know what I did with that. I don't seem to see it here. So, well, I'll have to refine this a little more next time I speak on this. But, so we have the sin offering. All right. So, I think I've conveyed well enough my point about the sin offering. And again, I want to emphasize this is all in a journey, a roadmap to what? Entering into the presence of Yehovah. God's telling Moses, listen, I'm going to appear to the nation of Israel, both Jew and Gentile, a mixed multitude. And so he says, as part of this offering up by Aharon, the next thing was the burnt offering. And the burnt offering is basically conveys a total dedication. It's to be kept lit. The altar and the burnt offerings are supposed to be on the altar constantly. It's an offering or an olah, that which goes up, conveys total dedication. This is really important. And I pointed out to all those who are listening, who watch this on YouTube, it is a voluntary surrender. God's not there with a rod to force you to do anything. It's your free will, your choosing. And it's a mixture of realistic, genuine acknowledgement and fear that He is the creator and the judge of all that exists. And you will give an account for your life. But it's also through God's goodness is how people come to repentance. Through the things that occur in your life that God shows His mercy. And not just God, but people in your life, circumstances, situations. That doesn't negate the fact that there's unfortunate things that happen too. But at the end of the day, God brings forth goodness, whether it's in this life or as you enter the next one. If you acknowledge that there is a next one. But it's not going to be a good day when you find out, if you don't believe there's another life, not going to be a good day for you. That's why you need to understand the dynamics of the sacrificial system and how it points to our being in the presence of God, having relationship with Him, and the relationship that we can have with and in Yeshua. Because of what He did. He has paid the price for past, present, and future sin. And the burnt offering shows, in the physical realm, it's always offered up regularly throughout each day. And it shows that we are dedicated, that we're surrendered to God, because we're doing it, we're obeying Him. It's this absolute surrender of a person's life to God, because the sacrifice is completely consumed. And it signifies a general atonement, and it serves as a soothing aroma that does what? It restores relationship with God and propitiates divine wrath. It brings a stop to the wrath that was due to you. And Yeshua did that for you. He was the substitution. Okay? You see, it was done daily. It was a consistent nature of these sacrifices. Were they done in the morning and the evening? It's a continuous need by us to stay in proper standing with God. Do you see that? That is what the burnt offering was pointing towards. And we have that today because of Yeshua. So, these offerings, and again, this is a roadmap to where? God appearing. If you want God to be present in your life, you've got to offer up a sacrifice. But where does that sacrifice come from? In your heart, your mind, in your, what did King David say? That to examine our hearts and see if there be any wicked way in me. That should be a daily thing. We as we walk daily, we should be aware and conscious of our conducts and our attitudes and how we're relating. We're an example. We're ambassadors of Him. Are you a good ambassador? I just want to say, this isn't about failing or succeeding. This is about the process that God has laid out for us to be focused and mindful of what He expects of us and what reflects Him. So, the sin offering in the new system that God created through the torture and death of Yeshua, on the altar of our lives, we're always offering up a morning and evening sacrifice. That means that blessed is the man whose thoughts are fixed on Thee. That's the burnt offering. That is a simple explanation of the burnt offering. Is your mind fixed on Him? If you want His presence, it needs to be. If you want His presence, you've got to do the maintenance when necessary to confess your sins, because He's faithful and just to forgive them. But you got to open up your heart and you got to dialogue with Him. He's the mediator between God and us, so we can have relationship with Him. And so then it says that, for a year old without defect for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for a peace offering. So, again, what is a peace offering? We see there's bloodshed here, because that is, I guess you could say, the recognizing, what does blood represent? Life! And the extinguishing of life if it's poured out. Are we mindful that our lives are being poured out? Yeshua poured his out so that we could have life. Are we pouring our lives out so that other people can have life? Because we're the ambassadors of that life. And so the peace offering conveys a desire to be at peace and to reconcile and fellowship and restore the harmony between two parties. You know, there was a time when Iran and America were at peace with one another. I don't know about you, but sometimes you have to take stern measures to get people to come to the table to make peace. Or the extent of the damage is far more reaching than if you had done nothing. A good example of that is a fact. Because we dropped the bombs on Japan, tens of thousands of lives were saved because of that. If we had gone in, it would have been guerrilla warfare, street to street, and thousands and tens of thousands more people would have died. And, you know, you think about it, God's coming to judge the earth. And unfortunately, as he judges them, people are going to die. Because they reject him and rebel. He's given us 6,000 years, 6 days, 6,000 years to yield to his plan and order for mankind. Deadlines are important. Giving people chances are important. But then holding those deadlines and following through is just as important. Because you may lose some people, but you know what? It'll put the fear of God in the remaining people alive to say, wait a minute, I don't want to go there. I don't want the same consequence to fall upon me. I want to come to the table. God, I want to come to the table. It's a principle of life by Elohim, the creator and judge of all things. You see, the peace offering is rooted in the concept of shalom, of wholeness and well-being. It symbolizes sitting at a table together, celebrating friendship rather than appeasing anger. It's an act of communion and goodwill. It restores relationships. It expresses gratitude. voluntarily, and a shared commitment. The peace offering, all the parties, the priests, the family that offered up the peace offering, they eat the sacrifice. It's cooked, and they have a meal. And what characterizes having a meal with someone? Fellowship, peace, harmony, oneness. We do that every week. We have oneg. And it's wonderful. It's just a beautiful time. And so you have the peace offering, and then you have the grain offering. And I want to say this, you know, I have been involved in the church in various stages through my life, and I see some of these sacrifices going on, definitely. There's elements of this taking place in Christianity, and, you know, but I don't think they really understand the overall process and the roadmap of holiness to God revealing Himself and God appearing. His glory, the Shekinah glory, falling down. Because God is holy. And I wonder about those places where the supposed glory of God fell, if it was, or it was a high level of emotionalism that just overcame the crowd. Good feelings, you know, the old saying, you can't trust your feelings. But if the glory of God came down where you were at, you would know it. It wouldn't be a feeling. When you're in the presence of the Creator of the universe, it's pretty clear who that is. And I say that only because I had an experience myself of being in the presence of God. I'll never forget it. It changed the direction of my life. And you know what? To all of you listening, it's a personal experience. And it's not for me to question it, to doubt it, or critique it. Between you and God. He's personal. And so the grain offering now, again, I want you to understand these sacrifices in the context of that which will bring forth the presence and the appearance of the glory of God in your life. You see, the grain offering conveys worship, gratitude, and dedication to God. It's good to worship the Lord. It's good. I will enter His gates with thanksgiving in my heart, which is gratitude. I will enter His courts with praise. That's worship. I will say, this is the day that Yehovah has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. You see, the dedication to God represents a voluntary gift of one's best work rather than atonement for sin. It acknowledges God's, I want to say it again, it's not all have that we can't work for our salvation, okay, but a grain offering is not a sin offering, although there's blood, okay? Maybe I back up, I may be wrong with that, I misspoke there. But the point is it's not an atonement for sin. It represents the dedication, this is important, of daily life, and the fine flour and the oil and salt symbolize purity, set-apartness, and your eternal covenant with God. It's worship, gratitude, free will gifts to God, to His work, an acknowledgement of God's provision, and just walking in purity. The salt represents the durability, the permanent nature of the covenant between God and His people. And then lastly, we have the wave offering, tenufa. It's conveying that the offering belonged to God and was accepted by Him. It signifies the dedication and consecration to God's service and gratitude, with offering often, and then it's returned to the priests for use. And so, I hope that this gave really put some substance on the first system of salvation and atonement and having eternal life, because that's all the fundamental reasons and purposes for those sacrifices not passed away. It's a symbol of the shadow of what should characterize the attitude of our hearts on a daily basis with our relationship with Yehovah. It's that simple. And if I can study this even further, which I would like to do because I'm fascinated with this, there's a lot more connections I can make, and I'd like to do more, and I actually know that I can do even better with kind of condensing it and summarizing and giving you some valuable information to ponder and to just kind of be mindful of on your daily walk with the Lord. So the rest of this Parashah talks about what's clean and unclean, what's kosher, and the kashrut laws. I'm not going to get into that. I'll make it real simple. It's about what God, and again, what God has declared as clean and unclean. If you look at the ark and how God brought all the animals into the ark, right there, before all these kashrut laws were written, there was unclean animals and clean animals. God is set apart. We're set apart to be clean, holy, pure, reflecting who God is. And it's important what you eat. Why? Because God said this is what's good for you. Just like your mom and dad say, no, you're not having all that soda. Or no, you're not eating all that candy, because it's not good for you. You need good things to put into your body. The unclean things usually carry in them unclean, biological, physical things that over time will be a detriment to your physical health and well-being. It's up to you. God's not forcing you. And again, I go to the vision of Peter. That was nothing about what Peter could or couldn't eat. That was simply God conveying to Peter what Peter understood as clean and unclean. And it was instructing him in understanding, Because prior to this vision or dream, it was not inappropriate for a Jew to go into a Goy or Gentile's house because they were considered unclean. So God put it in the framework of saying, okay, Peter, this is what you understand as unclean and clean. And the vast, the overwhelming elements of clean and unclean were food. And God was saying, now, because of what Yeshua did on the torture stake, you can go in to a Goy's or Gentile's house because Yeshua's sin offering has made Cornelius clean. So it's no longer an impediment or an obstacle for you to be in the presence of a Gentile. So I hope this has given you some perspective and expanded really what you're doing in the present gospel context of salvation and forgiveness and confessing and your relationship with the Lord. I hope it gives you a deeper perspective on it. And so, may the God of peace, which passes all understanding, guard your hearts and your minds in Messiah Yeshua. Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe from Beit Torah in Schnecksville, Pennsylvania. I hope this has been a blessing to you. If you've been blessed and you're moved to send us a gift, a donation to help us maintain the building and pay our bills. We're very small. We have, I say this every week, we have between 2 and 10 people that show up, and that's where we're at, and that's okay. We're here to acknowledge Yehovah, honor his Shabbat, the 7th day of rest, and to teach Torah, and to bring together Jew and Gentile to understand that if you don't understand the Torah, you cannot understand the Gospels and the epistles. Everything flows from the Torah and explains what they're saying in the Gospels and epistles, just as we did with the dream. So, Lord bless you. We thank you. To all our subscribers, we got 2 more. So, thank you for becoming part of our little brood here, our little shul. And I just Shavua Tov. Have a great week, and we look forward to Shabbat. It'll be here before you know it. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Jacob, my servant, hear now, O Israel. It was I who